So good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday night Anam Cara Meditation program. And with all my heart and with all my love, I welcome you to our program tonight. So good to have you join us this evening, being the power of your divine presence, the essence, the truth of who you are, and the power of your practices, your commitment to practice, and being ones who walk the fruit of practice into the world at a time when clearly it is so desperately needed. So thank you. Thank you for all you do to carry wisdom, love, kindness, grace into the world. Our gatherings are an opportunity to really delve into practices that help to really clear the mind and give us the direct experience of the fullness, the truth of who we are, the truth of what everyone is, the divine, right? The living presence of God. That's you. That's everyone. That's all there is. But to live in that knowledge, we need to practice. We need to undo the literally lifetimes of conditioning that have us bound to identification with the mind and all the stuff of the mind. So we do the practices to get free of that. So then we're empowered to walk love, compassion, kindness into the world, into the halls of power, into politics, everywhere, okay? So practices aren't just about escaping from the suffering of the world, they're about empowering us to truly transform the world by bringing the highest into it. And for that reason, we start with the opening mantras. The opening mantras are an invocation of the highest. They start with the first set of mantras are an invocation of the power of the infinite to remove obstacles. Obstacles to knowing the infinite, obstacles to walking that into the world, to living in that. And then the second set of mantras are an invocation of that direct knowing, to know the fullness, the infinitude of being. From the infinite comes the infinite, and the infinite remains. From the infinite, the divine, all pervasive, comes the infinite play of this world. All the galaxies, all the stars, everything. And even giving birth to that infinite creation, the infinite one remains in its fullness, embracing everything as itself. So the opening mantras are an invocation of that. And then we sit for a few moments just to rest in the stillness. Because whether or not we get that, the power of mantra, well, it can help to just calm the mind, just soothe the body, just ease our state in the moment. So we'll chant these mantras and then sit for a few moments just to really revel in the gifts of the power of mantra. So here we begin. Shri Mata Kali Devi Ki Jai Gajananam Bhutta Ganari Sevitam Kapita Jambo Palacharu Bhakshanam Umasutam Shokam Vinashakarakam Namami Vigneshwara Parapankajam Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Shri Ganeshaya Namaha Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamandaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Shri Mata Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai So once again, with all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. And our hearts and prayers go out to all those who are suffering throughout Ukraine, Russia, Europe, all over. Especially at the nexus where the war is happening. But it also brings to mind people who are suffering due to violence, to poverty, to being disempowered around the world. Well, our heart goes out to everyone. And it's really in order to be able to feel that, to be able to both feel the pain of the suffering of others and to feel the boundlessness of the love and compassion that is our root nature, we have to practice. That's what gives us the power to be able to be present with such suffering. Otherwise, the ordinary mind recoils. It would rather deny it, go into escape, put it aside, not attend to it, not feel empowered to be able to act in some way, to bring some relief in some form in the moment. So our practices are both about being able to train the mind, because that is where the obstacles really arise for ourselves and for the collective humanity. The problem is with the mind and our identification with content of mind. So the practices from the ancient yogic tradition, ancient Buddhist tradition, ancient mystical traditions, Christian, Judaic tradition, they're really, when you look at them, they're aimed at how do we transform our mind, how do we transform our attitude, how do we transform the ways we walk in the world so that we can be true carriers of the divine presence. All the traditions validate that divine presence is within each and every one of us. So we need to know that and then be empowered to live that into the world. And so on a practical level, that's really what the practices are aimed at. Now these days, many practices get done and taught in the context of stress management and how to lower your blood pressure, how to be a peak performer. So practices have been adapted or taken from these deeply spiritual and committed traditions and made to really, in a sense, serve the ordinary mind, the ego mind. It likes to perform better, do better, own more, get more, accomplish more, ego-driven, right? But the heart essence of practices isn't about that. And so when we're gathered together on these Thursday nights, we're really talking about the real highest level of practice, the highest goal of the practices across traditions. And that's to know the divine moment by moment, to live in that loving, compassionate embrace and feel empowered to walk it into our everyday lives as best we can, moment by moment. And that's really what the aim of the practices are for. So when we look at that, and tonight is what we call a dharma talk night, so it's about talking about practice and talking about it in the context of what it is to both train the mind, but always with the idea we're training the mind so we can know the boundlessness of the truth of who and what we are, the boundless consciousness that's suffused with boundless love, boundless compassion, boundless wisdom, boundless joy, rapture. It's a rapturous awareness that we can go into that empowers us to then deal with the suffering in the world, the suffering of our own lives, the suffering that might be going on in our own bodies. Right? So we need that really foundational support of true knowing in order to be really present, even with life itself. So that's what helps to inform the practices. And Buddha was particularly good at articulating. He was a great teacher, and so great at articulating and creating sort of clarity around practices. So I was going to do some readings from a collection called the Dhammapada. And the Dhammapada is So the earliest collection of Buddha's teachings. It was really written down. It was an oral tradition for a few centuries, so the Dhammapada itself wound up being written down somewhere around the 3rd century. So Buddha had left his body, his physical form for some years, but it had been conveyed as an oral tradition and then finally written down. And this copy of the Dhammapada, there are various translations. This one by Eknath Easwaran is a very good one. So it might be one of 1 or 2 or 3 that you might have in your library. So sometimes it's interesting to see the differences between translators' interpretation of what the text is speaking about. So these are the words of the Buddha, conveyed now for 2,500 years, for us to take refuge in, to learn, to get a perspective on the mind and practice, and how to live those kinds of practices, live that wisdom into our lives, into our world. Okay. So Buddha writes, our life is shaped by the mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows an evil thought as the wheels of a cart follow the oxen that draws it. Our life is shaped by the mind. We become what we think. Joy follows a pure thought, like a shadow that never leaves. He was angry with me. He attacked me. He defeated me. He robbed me. Those who dwell on such thoughts will never be free from hatred. He was angry with me. He attacked me. He defeated me. He robbed me. Those who do not dwell on such thoughts will surely become free from hatred. As you think, so you become, Buddha said. So watch your thoughts with care. For hatred can never put an end to hatred. Love alone can. This is an unalterable law. People forget their lives will end soon. For those who remember, quarrels come to an end. As a strong wind blows down a weak tree, Mara the tempter overwhelms weak people who, eating too much, working too little, are caught in the frantic pursuit of pleasure. As the strongest wind cannot shake a mountain, Mara cannot shake those who are self-disciplined and full of faith. Those who put on the saffron robes without purifying the mind, who lack truthfulness and self-control, are not fit to wear the saffron robe, the robes of a monk. But those who have purified their minds, who are endowed with truth and self-control, are truly fit to wear the saffron robe. The deluded, imagining trivial things to be vital to life, follow their vain fancies and never attain the highest knowledge. But the wise, knowing what is trivial and what is vital, set their thoughts on the supreme goal and attain the highest knowledge. See, as rain seeps through an ill-thatched hut, passion will seep through an untrained mind. As rain cannot seep through a well-thatched hut, passion cannot seep through a well-trained mind. Those who are selfish suffer here and hereafter. They suffer in both worlds from the results of their own actions. But those who are selfless rejoice here and rejoice hereafter. They rejoice in both worlds from the results of their selfless actions. Those who are selfish suffer in this life and in the next. They suffer seeing the results of the evil they have done, and more suffering awaits them in the next life. But those who are selfless rejoice in this life and in the next. They rejoice seeing the good that they have done, and more joy awaits them in the next life. See, those who recite many scriptures but fail to practice their teachings are like a cowherd counting another's cows. They do not share in the joys of spiritual life, but those who know few scriptures yet practice their teachings, overcoming all lust, hatred, delusions, greed, live with a pure mind in the highest wisdom. They stand without external supports and share in the joys of spiritual life. So training the mind and training it for selfless action. We've talked about that as seva, as this fundamental practice that informs our everyday life. Meditation has a particular period that we might be doing, or chanting. But seva, karma yoga, selfless action, that fills our life with the light of then being able to come from that boundlessness of heart, the boundlessness of generosity, of love, of compassion for others, finding ways to be able to serve that and bring it into the world. Again, that might be political action. That might be writing letters to senators, governors, the president. That may be taking action to support organizations that are helping to provide relief. These are all also forms of selfless service. It can be standing up for all the suffering beings who have no voice at all, because they're the animals and the living creatures of our planet who are suffering because the environment is being destroyed. That too can be selfless service. So it's not like there's just one form that we have to adhere to or one dogma about these things. It's finding that where our heart goes, what speaks to us, and then being able to approach that with that living quality of service, of love, of compassion, and bringing that into the world. Now Buddha goes on and speaks about the immature mind. He writes, "Long is the night to those who are awake. Long is the road to those who are weary. Long is the cycle of birth and death to those who do not know the Dharma. If you find no one to support you on the spiritual path, walk alone. There is no companionship with the immature. They think, oh, these sons are mine, this wealth is mine. They cannot even call themselves their own, much less their sons or their wealth. The immature who know they are immature, they have a little wisdom. But the immature who look on themselves as wise are utterly foolish. They cannot understand the Dharma even if they spend their whole life with the wise. How can the spoon know the taste of soup? If the mature spend even a short time with the wise, they will understand Dharma, just as the tongue knows the taste of soup. The immature are their own enemies, doing selfish deeds which will bring them sorrow. The deed is selfish, which brings remorse and suffering in its wake. But good is that deed which brings no remorse and only happiness in its wake. Sweet are selfish deeds to the immature until they see the results. When they see the results, they suffer. Even if they fast month after month, eating with only the tip of a blade of grass, they are not worth the 16th part of one who truly understands Dharma. As fresh milk needs time to curdle, a selfish deed takes time to bring sorrow in its wake. Life, like fire smoldering under the ashes, slowly does it burn the immature. So even if they pick up a little knowledge, the immature misuse it and break their heads instead of benefiting from it. The immature go after false prestige, precedence of fellow monks, power in the monastery, praise of all. Listen, monks and householders, I can do this, I can do that. I am right, you are wrong. See, their pride and their passion increase. Choose the path that leads to the extinguishment of the cravings of the mind. Avoid the road to profit and pleasure. Remember this always, O followers of Buddha, and strive always for freedom. See, better than a speech of 1,000 vain words is one thoughtful word which brings peace to the mind. Better than a poem of 1,000 vain verses is one thoughtful line which brings peace to the mind. Better than 100 poems of vain stanzas is one word of dharma that brings peace to the mind. One who conquers himself is greater than another who conquers 1,000 times 1,000 men on the battlefield. Be victorious over yourself and not over others. When you attain victory over yourself, not even the gods can turn it into defeat. Better than performing 1,000 rituals month by month for 100 years is a moment's homage to one living in wisdom. Better than tending the sacrificial fire in the forest for 1,000 years is a moment's homage to one living in wisdom. Making gifts and offerings for a whole year to earn merit is not worth a quarter of the honor paid to the wise. To those who honor the wise and follow them, 4 gifts will come in increasing measure: health, happiness, beauty, and long life. So better to live in virtue and wisdom for one day than to live 100 years with an evil, undisciplined mind. Better to live in goodness and wisdom for one day than to lead an ignorant and undisciplined life for 100 years. Better to live in strength and wisdom for one day than to lead a weak and idle life for 100 years. And better to live in freedom and wisdom for one day than to lead a conditioned life of bondage for 100 years. See, one day's glimpse of the deathless state is better than 100 years of life without it. One day's glimpse of dharma is better than 100 years of life without it. So dharma practice, disciplining the mind and stepping back from the mind. It's also the discipline of knowing that the mind is not who you are. It's a fundamental part of that practice, is being able to see there's this mind, there's a stream of thoughts, there's a stream of identifications that we go through moment by moment by moment. A thought arises, we become the thought. That's why Buddha was saying, as you think, so you become. A pure thought is, I am the boundless one. I am the infinite. I am Buddha. I am pure consciousness. I am the divine. To inhabit that, to rest in the wisdom of that, is what gives us access to the boundless nature of that awareness, the boundless love, the boundless compassion, the boundless wisdom, the boundless strength, the boundless joy. So we have to step back from the identification with the mind. So we're saying, if we're caught in the mind going, oh, he's so angry, he hurt me, he did this, he did that. Well, we're identified with the mind. We're identified with the roles the mind plays, the thing it became in that moment. And then the fullness of the truth of who we are is lost. So how can we live it into the world? We can't even live it into our own consciousness. So we have to keep letting it go, the mind, letting it go, to know the truth of who we are. That's those identifications are the nature of what Buddha and yogic traditions would talk about as the impurity of the mind. This is Buddha talking about impurity. You are like a withered leaf waiting for the messenger of death. That's the ordinary mind. That's the ordinary consciousness identified with mind and body. You are about to go on a long journey, but you are so unprepared. Light the lamp within. Strive hard to attain wisdom. Become pure and innocent. Live in the world of light. So that's the light of wisdom, the light of knowing. Your life has come to an end, and you are in the presence of death. There is no place to rest on this journey, and you are so unprepared. Light the lamp within. Strive hard to attain wisdom. Become pure and innocent, and you'll be free from birth and death. Consciousness is free of birth and death. It's the forms that it creates, mind and body, the things of the world, that come into existence and then go. Make your mind pure, as a silversmith blows away the impurities of silver, little by little, instant by instant. As rust consumes the iron which breeds it, evil deeds consume those who do them. So we purify the mind moment by moment. So blowing off the impurities. The impurities are that wrong identification. That's coming back to the awareness. Who am I now? What have I become now? Neti, not this, not that. You're not that. That's the nature of the mind. What's the truth of who you are? Keep coming back to that. The mantra is weak when not repeated. A house falls into ruin when not repaired. The body loses health when it is not exercised, and the watchman fails when vigilance is lost. Lack of generosity taints those who give. Selfish deeds are without merit here and hereafter. But there is no impurity greater than ignorance. Remove that through wisdom, and you will be pure. No greater impurity than ignorance. The ignorance, the root ignorance that Buddha was talking about, that the yogics, the non-dual systems talk about, is called avidya. That root ignorance is not knowing I am the infinite, and instead thinking I am the finite. I am this body, this mind, this life, this role, this conventional self. So we want to add to the awareness of this conventional self, vehicle of mind and body, the awareness of our infinite nature, our boundless nature, so that it can then infuse the mind and body, turn them into the vehicles that serve the highest purpose of human existence, to know and to serve, to know the infinite as ourself, and to serve it breath by breath until the breath finally leaves the body and we merge once again fully and completely into that unity. So that's the nature of practice and where it takes us. Life seems easy for one without shame, no better than a crow, a mischief maker who is insolent and dissolute. Life is hard for one who's humble, gentle, and detached, who tries to live in purity. They dig their own graves who kill, lie, get drunk, and covet the wealth or spouse of another. Those who drink to intoxication are digging up their own roots. Any indiscipline brings evil in its wake. Know this, and do not let greed and vice bring you lingering pain. Some give out of faith, others out of friendship. But do not envy others for the gifts they receive, or you will have no peace of mind by day or night. Those who have destroyed the roots of jealousy have peace of mind always. For there is no fire like lust, no jailer like hate, no snare like infatuation, no torrent like greed. It is easy to see the faults of others. We winnow them like chaff. It is hard to see our own. We hide them as a gambler hides a losing draw. But when one keeps dwelling on the faults of others, his own compulsions grow worse, making it harder to overcome them. There is no path in the sky. There is no refuge in the world for those driven by their desires. But the followers of the wisdom of Buddha live in freedom. There is no path in the sky. There is no refuge in the world for those who are driven by desires. All is change in the world. But the disciples of Buddha are never shaken. That means being a disciple of wisdom, of true knowing, not of a dogma or a creed. To be a disciple of Buddha is to be a disciple of your own Buddha nature. It's to be a follower of your own highest self. It's to be a follower of the light of wisdom that is the truth of who you are. There is no outside Buddha. There's an old saying in the Buddhist tradition, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Rather stunning. It was really meant that if we're seeking and looking and to see a Buddha out in the outside world, We're caught in duality. We are the Buddha. You are the Buddha. You become the disciple of your highest nature. You become the follower of the truth, the consciousness, the fullness of being that is who you are. And those who don't, they just are lost in an emptiness that can't be filled. Can't be filled. Doesn't matter how many billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, doesn't matter how many countries they conquer, they're empty. And they just keep inflicting their suffering on more and more people, more and more beings throughout the environment, throughout the entire earth. So carriers of truth, we have to carry that into the world, that kind of knowing. To know that for ourselves so we feel empowered and strengthened, knowing the fullness of our being. Because that fullness is also not diminished by the lack, the want, the needs, the suffering of others. That fullness is the infinite. The infinite became the infinite, and yet the infinite remains. So the kind of boundlessness of strength, the boundlessness of spirit, the boundlessness of love and compassion that we need comes from that. It's not mind-born. The poor mind, when it encounters this level of suffering, this irrational violence, this destructiveness in humans, that our mind is repulsed. Our mind can be overwhelmed by it. So we need to be able to rest in the highest truth so we can be present and walk and find effective ways to transform the world, to help try and bring wisdom to those who are acting out of such ignorance, to bring containment to them until they find that wisdom. They still have to be stopped. They still need to be contained so as not to harm themselves and others. But we can do that with compassion. We can do that with wisdom. We can do that with a strength born of deep knowing. That's what the practices are also aimed at. So we live the fullness of life, embraced by the wisdom that holds it all. That's the truth of who we are. So to go more deeply into that, we do practices like contemplation, reading the words of Buddha and contemplating their meaning and how they apply to ourselves. Now we're going to be chanting one of the Maha Mantras, the great mantras, that throbs with the power of that consciousness. It's the mantra of the Great Mother, Om Kali Ma, Kali Namo Nama. Kali, the great goddess, the dark goddess. Dark because she's so mysterious, but powerful, ferocious in destroying ignorance and freeing beings from being bound and caught in that ignorance. So she's known in every tradition. She's Maha Bhagavati Prajna Paramita in the Buddhist tradition. She's the Holy Mother in the Christian tradition. She's Shekinah, she's Holy Spirit. She's all that. Right? So when we're chanting Om Kali Ma, Kali Namo Nama, we're taking refuge in that, but also knowing that consciousness that is her is also beyond all forms. It's even beyond masculine and feminine. So as we become absorbed in the throb of the chant of the mantra and then sit in that in meditation, we might discover that we start to just feel the throb of awareness. Doesn't even have a sound form. Doesn't have a form of a being. It's just this throb of boundless awareness suffused with this loving wisdom that embraces all. That's where we can dissolve into, take refuge there, and then come out more empowered to walk that wisdom into the world. So we'll chant for a few minutes and then sit in the stillness. And in that stillness, you can just keep silently repeating, Om Kali Ma, Om Kali Ma, Om Kali Ma. Take refuge in the Divine Mother, Om Kali Ma. So now we begin.
Oh.
So we end with this prayer. May all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. So Dharma, it's really coming home to the truth of who we are, and then living that into the world. And that every moment is a practice, meaning every moment we're bringing consciousness to what are we doing, what are we identified with, what are we bringing into the world in that moment. Dharma, dedicating each day, each breath, each moment to living the truth of our highest nature, coming home to that, seeing it in others, living it into the world. Humanity has been plagued forever by people flailing about in ignorance and the horrific pain that comes from the emptiness born of that ignorance, not knowing the fullness of the truth of who you are, drives people to want to accumulate wealth, power, possessions, but then they're possessed by them. They're still empty. So we see that. We bring that wisdom and that clarity and the compassion to know the suffering that's giving birth to the suffering they're inflicting others with. But also empowered to act with wisdom and strength to transform the world, to confront that kind of ignorance and what it gives birth to walk the truth of loving kindness and strength into the world. We're empowered to do that every day, throughout our lives. And so, to do that, we take refuge. We take refuge in the source of all the wisdom and the practices, the One. We take refuge in the practices, the knowledge, the wisdom that informs them, that helps relieve the mind of its ignorance. We take refuge in a community of like-minded seekers endeavoring to bring that truth and live that into the world. I'm not alone in this. So I want to thank you for bringing the power of your presence, your divine nature, this evening and into everyday life, for living practices. They don't have to be perfect. They can be intermittent. We strive to make them stronger, more continuous. But the state of knowing is continuous. The mind is what's identified with the intermittent states of waking, dream, deep sleep, intermittent practice. Your true nature, your Buddha nature, your Christ consciousness, call it whatever we want, that's continuously aware, continuously knowing, continuously present. We turn our attention to that so it can help suffuse the vehicles of mind and body with that wisdom, that love, that strength, that compassion. So thank you for being ones who endeavor to do that. And I want to thank you for the many ways you support Anam Cara and pass on our e-newsletters. If you haven't signed up, you can always do that on the website. We have a new course coming up that's going to start at the beginning of April, based on Kali's Bazaar, a book of, it's a collection of poetry and sayings about the nature of our highest knowing and ways of living that into the world. So everybody's welcome to join us for that course. There is a limited number of slots in that course, so that we keep it small enough to have interaction and discussion. So if you do want to sign up, please sign up now. The last course we offered got filled up and people weren't able to join us for that. So please do register if you're interested. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. So keep coming home to the truth of who you are. Keep taking refuge in the throb of the infinite that is Munter. That is a throb of love that can drench the mind and drown the world in that. Namaste.